Welcome to Pending Final, the podcast about all things visual effects. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Pending Final, the podcast about all things visual effects. I am your host, Shannon, and I am joined by Helen. So, kind of starting the episode, I realized something, doing some reviews. So, in our previous episode, in our title's sake, we are pending final.
Yes.
I did not realize that term is changeable per place, like per company.
Yeah, so some places it's final pending and sometimes it's pending final.
Or now it's proposed final.
Ah, see, that to me is a different thing.
Is it?
Yeah, like a proposed final is the vendor is saying, we want to present this to you for final. And pending final or final pending is the clients are willing to final it as long as some other condition is met, like the rest of the sequence is approved.
Oh.
So to me, it's like the opposite side of it almost, like one's before you've presented it and one's after.
Oh, interesting. Okay, because I thought it was interchangeable, because then also, a little funny story, when you were mentioning softwares last time, you said PF track. I thought that, I've heard that term before, I thought that was a tracking software.
It is.
Oh, it's not
I was an idiot and I said the wrong thing. That's housekeeping for you. That's housekeeping for you right there. PF Track is a match move software.
Because I thought that, but I was like, oh, well, that makes sense. Because if it's pending final, proposed final, oh, that's clever. Oh, okay.
No.
So, wow, I feel bad. I feel like that kind of backfired.
No, you shouldn't, because actually that was something I wanted to bring up. The PF stands for Pixel Farm, because that's the company that make it.
Oh.
And it's just a tracking software. The one that I was thinking of, it's called F-Track. So only one letter different, but it's called F-Track, the one that I was thinking of.
Oh my god. Sounds like file tracking or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like File Manager or File Maker or all those generic named things.
Yeah.
But yeah, F-Track is what I was thinking of. And PF-Track is for something entirely different to do with Match Move, which is actually the first thing on the pipeline that is today's topic. Check that out for a segue.
Exactly, that's amazing. Okay, well then take it away.
That's the best segue you will ever get.
Yes.
So yeah, last week we mentioned the VFX pipeline a whole bunch. And I think I very briefly just kind of like yelled out a whole bunch of things in an order. In fact, let's start with you, Shannon, because I think you get the beginning of this whole pipeline.
That's very true.
Let's talk about a shot.
Yeah, basically things are filmed on set or they're done in a virtual production. And then they are brought to said facility. And it is brought into a security process where basically there's, it has to be converted to various formats. Color matching has to match. All this kind of prep has to be done before we can even get it to the artists to do their basic parts of the pipeline. It has to all start looking great. So I've heard a couple different terms interchangeably now. You have sometimes an IO department, a data lab department, there's studio,
there's ingest.
I mean, that's the funny thing. Everything kind of has its own name. But luckily, it then, from my side of the pipeline, because the thing about pipelines, it's interesting, it's not just one pipe. It's like, think of Mario, all these different pipes everywhere, but somehow eventually they all work together. It then comes in to editorial. That is where we will watch the edit that is provided by the clients. Then we will make sure all the frames are in perfect matching order. We have to put down notes like, is it a reposition, which basically means like, has it been scaled in, scaled out? All these kind of things. And then that is where we kind of do a lot of handing off to production. And then it's part of this translation that goes between. So yeah, we kind of like the revolving door. We're the first ones to really get into it, and then we hand it off. And then we're one of the last people to touch things and get it out of the building. So yes, once it has come through the data people and editorial, we then head it over to production, which that's your cue, Helen.
It certainly is. So if we imagine that the shot that we've had in is something from, say, Paul, the Edgar Wright movie about an alien.
Yes.
It's
Oh,
got
good
Simon
example.
Pegg, Edgar Wright. It's got a full CG character in most of the movie, interacting with the environment, interacting with the characters, complex character. First thing we do is we build it. So imagine you've got a puppet that you were going to use like a Muppet. You'd have the skeleton or the hand inside it. That's rigging. You'd have the material that it's made of. So the shape of it, that's modeling. The color of it is the textures, and how it reacts under light is look dev. And then that character is all virtual, so none of that you can actually touch, but all of that is moved around within the computer. And that's the first thing we do is we build Paul. Next in our so that's
and can I kind of bounce into that? Sometimes, correct me if I'm wrong, Helen, these are called assets, and sometimes these assets are actually being built while we are waiting for said footage to come in from set. So they kind of are happening at the same time, correct?
Ideally, it happens way before the footage comes in, because what you want to be able to do is get that first piece of footage in and just start working on it immediately. You don't want to have to then wait for the footage to come in and then go, aha, we need a box. You want to just be like, oh, the stuff that's coming in, we'll be getting a box. Like, let's build that now.
Gotcha.
That's the ideal situation. Obviously, it's not perfect. People change their mind. People suddenly go, you know, it'd be a really good addition here. Let's make that box that we were going to have into a jar, and then it has to be built from scratch.
Yeah.
Because somebody had a smart idea. So it sometimes we get things nice and early. Sometimes we get things a little bit later on. But that's the assets or build department who will be dealing with that. So in our shot, Paul is going to be walking around on set, and let's say he's picking up an orange. Match Move is the first department to touch this shot. What they will do is they will make a virtual camera so that when we place Paul in a 3D space, it matches the real space that exists. So it will be, say it's just a plain, let's do super simple, plain room, box, nothing fancy in there, table in the corner. Match Move will just lay out those surfaces for us so that we can make sure that when we render Paul, he's in the right place. Camera tracking also involves objects. So the orange that Paul will be picking up, it's going to be a real orange. And somebody on set in a little green suit, which everyone has seen in the behind the scenes footage, will sit there on set and he will lift the orange. That's it. The camera tracking people will track that orange as well so that we know exactly where it is. After that, we get to layout. In this department, usually a lot of the time it's placing assets or build items into scenes. So each of the shots will be a separate file. And the asset will be placed into that scene, and that's ready to go. Sometimes it's got some simple animation in there, but quite often it will just be this plain box that he's going to be in. We just need to put the asset that is Paul in there. It allows the animation department downstream to just get on with their job. They will take Paul and they will use the rig, the skeleton that the build and asset department gave him, and they will use that to make him move, and they will, make him walk over to the orange and pick it up and put it down and then make a funny face.
And can I jump in slightly on this?
Go for it.
This is also, I know sometimes it can be a little bit of a heated topic in the visual effect world, but this is also where motion capture can kind of come into play,
It absolutely can.
Where it's, and I think that can go hand in hand, because I've done actually motion capture, and you can get a great base kind of skeleton and rigging. I can make Paul do the Macarena, but sometimes the area, because of the tracking markers, one's fallen off. So all of a sudden his arm goes, and you need to have someone by hand kind of fix that to make it work.
I wish the listeners could have seen that you just did. Goodness me.
Yeah, I can't even try to describe it. Just basically a noodle arm, and it breaks, and things. So, but that's also where, so I know people have probably heard a lot about motion capture because of Andy Serkis, and a lot of games nowadays is doing that. So I'm just kind of chiming in onto where that would kind of fall into this pipeline, because I think that's something more of the common layman people would, non-industry people would go, oh, what's this mocap thing?
Yeah.
So, and your random trivia, that was actually a Mortal Kombat character and was a joke. It was called mocap. There's your random
Love
facts.
it.
So one per episode. Sorry, Helen, continue.
No, that's cool. It's funny because there's a lot of really impressive characters that have had like facial tracking. Everyone can point out Avatar, blah blah blah. But I'm going to talk about Davy Jones because I love that character so much. And it's definitely not because me and my husband are playing Kingdom Hearts right now. But I love Davy Jones, and I think that there's a lot of the performance that absolutely will come from the actors, especially when the team in assets or build are actually making the character look a little bit like that actor. So Davy Jones, he's a squid-faced man, but he's also very clearly Bill Nye.
Yes.
And that's part of the absolute magic that comes from assets. Like the work that they do is astonishing. Every single like CG creature or environment that you see was built by these people. And I feel that a lot of the time they're a bit of like an unsung hero because everyone's like, ooh, the animation, ooh, the big fiery explosions.
Yeah.
And very few people go, yeah, but look at the tiger. Like just standing there. It's pretty good.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of fiery explosions, after animation comes simulation. So that's anything from, say, Paul is wearing a beautiful flowing Hawaiian shirt. The way that shifts in the wind, that will be done by a cloth department. Or say there's a fire burning in the background, that'll be FX. Different companies have got different names for things, but generally FX, cloth, fur, fluids, they're generally recognized across the industry.
And also to chime in on this as well, what's interesting is a lot of these different companies will make their own softwares for these types of simulations. These are not going to be off the shelf because it's a tool, and and that's why I think sometimes you can see a visual effect from one company. Some companies do fur better than cloth, than fire. You can tell, like.
So for a long time, a lot of companies did use off-the-shelf software. And then it feels like everybody then suddenly went, oh no, we could write better code. We could do something better than this. Especially now in simulation, it feels like Houdini's come out as like, this is a piece of software that exists that we can all use, and you can get new graduates learning how to use it, and they can start at a company and they know it, because that's the bonus. But with these new artists coming in, I think because Houdini is so sophisticated.
Now, what is Houdini? Because I learned Maya and Nuke. What is Houdini?
Houdini is a software that specializes in simulations.
Okay.
There's like, you can do water simulations, fire, you can do the surface of a sun, you can do like cloth. I know that a lot of different simulation departments are all starting to use that same software, and it means that they're more easily able to interact with each other. You can pass things back and forth.
It's difficult in its own ways, because even with the software talking to each other, this is where the talent comes in. This is where the talent helps drive the tool, because that software will not make the fur and water contact look right. That's where you need a human body to go, oh, that's not quite, no, the fur is bunching up a little bit too much, or no, that's not enough, and I mean, oh my God, the amount of reference photos, it's another thing editorial does in said pipeline. All the reference photos, putting it in a database, and footage, not just reference photos, but footage for these things. Like, you could be randomly walking. Why am I watching a dog play in leaves, not realizing that that's going to be later used for the animators to create something in a film? So yeah, it's so funny. You never know where this is going till like 6 months later. You're like, you see a daily, and you're like, oh, that was why. So. Yeah, so I think that's the other thing that really kind of, again, ties into this pipeline. Yes, things can be streamlined, but they still need that human and that talent touch to drive it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Once we have our character animated, we have all his clothes simulated, there's a fire burning in the background. The next team that pick it up is rendering or lighting, depending on where you're at, because the different companies call it different things. These are the people who, sure, that fire in the back of the scene, that needs to be casting some light. So what they will be doing is they will be setting up a light in the scene, almost imagine they have physically had a lamp, and they can shine it on the character. They also, because this is a 3D character, a CGI character in a real environment, they match the lighting of the real environment to the lighting that is cast on the character. So that's one of the truly artistic parts of this, is like the eye that the lighting team have is crazy. I just love lighting. What am I talking about?
It is one of my favorite dailies to look at, because sometimes some lighting dailies practically look like comp dailies.
What lighting will do once they have rendered the character out that they're dealing with, and we can definitely go into much deeper talking about rendering later down the line, because it's very complex. But if you imagine that they have taken a magazine, cut out the character and slapped it onto the background, it's called a slap comp, what they do. And what they're doing is they're just laying the part that they have done in CG over the background that really exists. So that there's a very quick way of seeing, like, is this working? Does the lighting go completely in the opposite direction? Is it way too bright for the room that it's in? Is it too dark? Do we need it to be a different color? So all this sort of stuff, it's very easy to see if you slap them together. So slap comp is another thing that will be heard a lot by newcomers to the industry. But it's a really nice, and I think people like to say quick and dirty way to see where you're at. Now, in order to make that beautiful, it gets passed on to compositing. And one of the parts of compositing is rotoscope and paint or paint prep, or prep, depending on where you are, because everyone's got a different term for it. Paint prep or paint, or I'm just going to call it prep for now. And now I've said prep so often, Mike, I don't remember what the word means. Prep is
preparation, I would think.
Yeah. Prep is, you've got Harry Potter being thrown against a wall. He's on wires, painting out those wires so that it doesn't look like he's on wires. Nice and simple. So roto and prep are two of the most, they're considered some of the most junior positions in the industry, but they are some of the most difficult, some of the most time consuming. If your artist has done it right, you don't even see it. This is why people think that things are real in movies that definitely aren't, is because they can't see the hydraulics under a car that gets flipped. Like, that's all been painted out, and nobody knows that it was painted out because it's so seamless. And that is a truly artistic, incredible thing that they do.
It's the only visual effects I have on a reel. Is that's what I had to do as a graduation project, was to literally prep a wall and paint out of Ealing Studios and put it in cards. And I'm going to start dropping some comp terms here, but like putting it on cards and having a camera and doing all the tracking and things like that. And yeah, because that's one of the first kind of things. So yes, I've done it, and it's not easy, especially when a camera's moving, or it's quite, again, it's amazing if done right, very much so.
Something else that prep will do, right back at the beginning, Match Move were putting in a camera and they were mapping out where the room was. One of the easiest ways for them to map out the room is to have markers on the walls. And that's something else that everyone will have seen in behind the scenes videos. You've got a big green screen, but on it, there's little crosses in white tape marked out. Looks like random spacing, but it's a very specific calculated amount that they are apart. And that is what Match Move used to work out how far away that wall is from the camera, what angle it's at. And prep, they have to get rid of those markers so that it's easier for the rest of the team to deal with that plate or scan or whatever it is that we're calling it. So everyone's working on the same footage, but they're just approaching it in different ways. Rotoscope are the ones who will be, say Paul walks behind that table before he picks up that orange. Because if we hadn't rotoscoped out that table, then when he walks behind it, because he's just a computer generated character, he's gonna and he's always laid over the top of the footage, he'll just go in front of that table. So we need a way to mask out that table so that he will appear to be going behind it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense, yeah. And then I guess compositing, you've already kind of talked about compositing.
So compositing is putting it all together and making sure that it all blends together. We'll have the lighting or render passes will often be in separate layers, so that the compositing department can sort of treat them all differently. So say they want to address some little edges that looked a little bit strange when Paul was rendered out, they'll work on those themselves. If there's any often there's different lights that they can add in or take away, which is part of Katana, which is the software that lighters and rendering teams usually use. I say usually, often use. And they are the ones who create the final output that will be delivered to the clients. They're the only team who will get a pending final status.
Yes. Yes. Because that's probably why a lot of the things I've seen in reviews and things when we were talking about daily sessions was I was in a lot of the comp dailies.
Yeah. And
because that requires a bit more of the higher up supervisors and things, whereas other daily sessions would have been run by those said soups. Well, I guess when we rephrase that, depending on where you are working.
Yeah.
So yes, so comp will be the only one that gets that lovely PF stamp.
But comp will also be adding in things like matte paintings. So say there's a window in the room and there's going to be a beautiful landscape out there, and there's a team who do those gorgeous matte paintings, and that will be put behind there, and compositing will make it so it looks like there's glass in that window, and that's what you're looking through to see the beautiful matte painting. It's a huge array of crazy tricks that you honestly will never, until you actually see the passes broken down that comp put them through, you won't fully understand what it is. They are dialing in and out like tiny amounts of color. Like the amount of times that I've been in a session and I've just looked at a shot that is almost entirely a green forest, and I've heard there's too much red in this. And then they will on the fly be able to just during dailies, one of the things that often supervisors can do is dial in small additions like this, so they can change the amount of red or blue or yellow that's in a shot. Wow. That's in a shot, and you can see the difference all of a sudden. When they said take out some of the red, you were like, oh, there was so much red in that. How did I not see this entirely green shot had red in it?
Yes, exactly.
And that's why the compositing supervisors are incredible. Like the eye that they have, the creative eye that they have. And at every level, in every step of the VFX pipeline, everyone's a creative. Even if they are doing things like prep, which everyone considers a menial task, blah blah blah, but they have to have a creative eye in order to be able to completely paint out and mask out that there was anything even there in the first place. That's an artistic feat. Just because it's not crazy colors and like wild simulations doesn't mean that that's not also an art. This is a completely insane industry. And it's all art.
It is. It really is. Like, I think one of the best photos I ever took at work once was one of the places I used to work had a giant Jenga in the kitchen. And I will never forget, someone had taken this Jenga and literally did this like tower and had also the big chess pieces And it was the most cool tower I had ever seen. And I was like, this is what happens when you are in a room full of engineers and artists.
Yes.
It's just mind-blowing because it was perfectly symmetrical. And it just, I mean, some jerk really could have just obviously knocked it over, but I just couldn't believe it. I was just like, wow. That sums it up. It is engineers and artists working hand in hand. Because what happens is, going back to the pipeline, when comp gets that approval or pending final or whatever, we have to send it to the clients. And then that's when it goes back to editorial, where we now take all the different passes and we make sure everything's still matching up. And then it goes to IO, studio, whatever, and gets sent to the client. Like I said, first one's in when the last one's out. And then there's this massive chunk in the middle. But
yeah, because at the end of the day, what we are doing is creating a series of pretty images and then delivering those to the people who have paid for them.
Yes, in a nutshell.
In the very simplest terms, we are providing the final product, which is the visuals of this movie.
Yes. And hence why it's called visual effects and not special effects.
Yes, and we can go into that later.
Yes.
I have many opinions on this.
Yeah, so
and I will happily talk about the history of it forever. Love it.
So I think we've pretty much covered all that for Pipeline. Would you agree?
We have. I mean, this is just the VFX pipeline. So this is just the moving parts that get the material in the building dealt with and back out again.
Yes, there is another kind of post-production that happens afterwards, like grading and sound mixing and everything, because the grading also helps tie those visual effect shots in with other like non-VFX shots on either top and tail or beginning and end of them. So yes, Helen is completely right that it is a way to, it's just the VFX pipeline. It is not the full film pipeline.
Yeah. And even within the facility, there's so many other people involved in this. Like often there's an entire software or research and development sort of department that will be there writing, hey, we can improve this tool that we have. We can simulate fur better. We can trace light better. We can make the tools that we have for this particular requirement that the clients have faster so that we can do more in a shorter amount of time. And those people are also instrumental in why visual effects are getting better and better every year. It's not because I would say the artists are as good now as they were in 1992. They just have access to much better tools. And that's because we have, like you say, engineers. We have people who are extraordinarily smart in this industry, who are writing thousands, millions of lines of code of just how to make your visual effects experience better. And they're amazing too.
They are amazing. And it's all about time too. It's a very double-edged sword, because obviously by creating your own in-house tools and things like that, you're able to work better. The pipeline is smoother and more seamless. But then, of course, that starts raising the bar. And then you start all of a sudden what used to take some places 2 years, all of a sudden the next film, they want it in a year and a half. And then they want it in a year. And it's just things get crunched. So it's great because life is easier, but then it never quite gets easier, because then all of a sudden then now you can deliver faster. And it's a very,
In the same way that a gas will fill the container in which it is placed, visual effects will take the amount of time that you are given. So it doesn't matter whether you're given a week to do something or 2 years to do something. It will take the week or it will take the 2 years, no matter what task that is. If you want to make Avengers Endgame in 1 week, you'll get whatever you're given in 1 week. And if you're given 2 years, it will take 2 years. But yeah, in the same way that gas fills the container that it is enclosed in, visual effects will take as much time as you allow it to.
So that pretty much wraps up Pipeline. So we're going to jump into kind of what we're calling crosstalk. And we are going to talk about the Oscars, aren't we, Helen?
We are. I do very quickly want to briefly bring up the Screen Actors Guild Awards, the SAG Awards.
Yes, SAG,
which Black Panther, amazingly, got Best Cast, and I'm so proud of them. But they also, like, they've gotten so many awards already, and they are actually up for Best Picture in the Oscars, and I feel like how well they've done so far might actually be a bit of an indicator whether I think they might get it, you know?
First of all, I'm so glad they did away with, what was that stupid one they proposed?
Oh, like most popular, I think it was.
Yeah, I literally was like, we are not, I'm sorry.
This is not the MTV Awards.
This is literally, that's exactly what I was about to say. We are not the fucking MTV Movie Awards.
Teen Choice.
Yeah, there's no, like, Best Kiss or that. I'm like, not the Oscars. Do not knock down that prestigious, no. Just no.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, if you don't want to give it Best Picture, then don't give it Best Picture.
Yeah.
Don't give it like a conciliatory participation award. Yes.
It's what it literally felt like. I was just like, don't, and especially not that film. But also,
film. I feel like they proposed it. It was a while ago, and I think they proposed it for Avengers.
Oh, okay. I know it was proposed for a Marvel film, and I wasn't sure if it was for Black Panther or Avengers, but...
Because it felt like it was... Maybe I'm...
Can you imagine if a mainstream, like, popcorn movie wins Best Picture? Like...
I mean, let's look at the rest of the things on this list. We've got Black Panther,
yes.
Black Klansman, Bohemian Rhapsody, The Favourite, Green Book, Roma, A Star is Born, and Vice.
A Star is Born has been remade like 5 times, by the way. I am not saying that it's not bad. I have not seen it myself.
And A Star is Born is up for Best Adapted Screenplay. Like, just stop making it.
I will say, though, I mean, I have heard good things, and I've heard great things. And I actually think Lady Gaga is great. And I like Bradley Cooper a lot, too. So, I mean, I just never saw it in the cinema. For me, some films, I will admit, I am my popcorn kind of person. I have to be like, is this worth seeing on the big screen? That is not. I will see it, but I'll just wait until it's, streaming or something. But
yeah.
Now, I did go see Bohemian Rhapsody.
I think that needed a big screen.
Yes. Well, yeah, because you had to get the feeling of the crowd work.
Yeah.
The crowds and things. Now, The Favourite, I don't think I've heard of Green Book.
I've heard so many good things about The Favourite. So many people have told me to see it.
Yeah, and I like a period. I like kind of period costume drama films or whatever. But you know what? I just saw Black Klansman.
It feels a bit Oscar baity. I'm surprised First Man isn't on here because that was the most Oscar baity looking film I've ever seen a trailer for in my life.
Well, then some people must not. Black Klansman wasn't actually like bad, and it didn't feel like it was trying too hard.
Yeah.
But it was very interesting the whole time. Have you seen it?
I have, yeah.
Oh, okay, so good. So I'm not spoiling anything for you.
Also, it's a story about okay, continue.
But it's funny, like. Adam Driver is nominated for Best Supporting Actor. Now, Adam Driver is a fantastic actor, but I do feel there's some politics played there because I don't feel his performance was anything spectacular in that film.
Yeah.
At all.
Well, who else is up for Supporting Actor? Let's see. Wow, Richard E. Grant. I haven't seen that name in a while.
But yeah, look at this. Sam Rockwell, Sam Elliott. Oh, that's what Vice is. It's the Dick Cheney film. Oh. I guess because we didn't really have
I
it
feel
over
like
here.
It's only just come out here. To me, it's missed Oscar season. But I guess in the US, it didn't miss Oscar season at all. These are, the problem is that things like Green Book and Vice are actually things that are on my list of things to watch. This is probably one of the first Oscar years where I've gone I didn't see a lot of these. I meant to, but they've also
I'm feeling the same way.
A Star is Born I was never going to watch. Ever. That's not my jam. But everything else on there, even Roma, I was kind of okay, I'll get round to it. And then Oscar season is suddenly upon you and you're just oh God, I haven't seen anything this year.
Yeah. That's interesting that Emma Stone and Rachel Weisz are both up for supporting role.
I mean, they were
from the
both
same
supporting.
film. I know, but I just think that's interesting. I don't know if I've seen that before. It probably has happened before, but to be two nominees from the same film.
How about film editing?
Yes, so film editing. Let me scroll. Do you know, the film editing Oscar is an interesting one because much like visual effects, editing, if done right, is actually you
shouldn't notice.
Correct. You shouldn't notice it. That is the true sign of a good editor. Or unless, you know, I was thinking about this before we started recording that the only film that really stood out to me for best editing, actually two, that it's not a gimmick edit, but it really was amazing, was Moulin Rouge, which Moulin Rouge is actually one of the few films that has no continuity errors, hardly at all. And it is just the going from dancing to this, to that, to that. It's just absolutely seamless. But for a film like that, you had to be. And actually, Slumdog Millionaire. But Slumdog Millionaire was a bit more, not quite gimmicky, but because we were jumping timelines, they did a really good job tying the film. Slight spoilers if you guys haven't seen it. It's been 10 years now.
It's been out for a very long time.
It's been out for a decade. But, you know, you have the base of it being at Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, but every question, it goes back to how he knows the answer to this. And it's just so brilliantly edited and just how it goes in and out, and it's not jarring. And so kind of going again into like these nominees, I haven't seen The Favorite, but I could see that one would have some pretty good editing. Black Klansman, again, I've just seen it recently. Nothing stood out to me editing-wise, but maybe that's a good thing. It didn't have me going, oh, God, the editing on that. Bohemian Rhapsody, I quite enjoyed that, and that had some really good segments. And I think what will be quite interesting is to see how it was edited compared to the Live Aid footage.
Yeah.
How cool of an Easter egg would it be that... It's not quite, obviously, because we had some POV shots, but and for those listeners, that's point of view shots. That obviously wouldn't have been where the cameras were, but, you know, if some of the cuts would have been literally how when they were live mixing it in 82, so it's almost like you were watching the footage again. But I don't know, it's very tricky. So I don't know, like the film editing one, even though I am an editor, it will never happen, but one day would have loved to have been like, yay, thank you, Academy. Looking at that list, I have no idea who would get it. And I would be concerned too, because we all know award season, whatever award season it is, be it VES, BAFTA, Oscars, there is some politics involved.
Oh, yeah, every time.
Like, pretty much, it's quite rare that whoever gets Best Director gets Best Picture. There are some few exceptions. Yeah. You know, things like that. Well,
also because Best Picture is often, unless the director is also the producer, Best Picture is often picked up by the producer. And that's just a peculiar thing about politics as well. Often the director will be up there because quite often the director has put in a chunk of money and capital behind a film, so they will end up being one of the many, many producers on a show. But it's interesting how sometimes those don't really overlap, which is why I think Roma's going to get Best Director.
Do you feel it deserves it, or do you feel it's a bit of a gimmick?
I feel like it is the Academy being the Academy.
Fair. Smart answer.
The other thing that obviously we need to talk about Best Visual Effects.
Yes, that's when we're tying in.
So visual effects, we have Avengers Infinity War, obviously. Christopher Robin, surprising for me. First Man, Ready Player One, and Solo, a Star Wars story. So for me, it's between Infinity War and First Man.
First Man is the only one I haven't seen. Christopher Robin, it was a bit of a boring film, not gonna lie. Obviously, I was a massive Winnie the Pooh fan as a child. But we're not gonna go into the story. But
it feels like the trailer tugged on more heartstrings than the film itself did.
Yeah, so you've seen it then.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess each one's also kind of a different visual effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because Christopher Robin, and since we're a VFX podcast, we're going to break it down a little bit. Christopher Robin, its strengths were you were just kind of like Helen wonderfully described earlier was taking, Pooh, Tigger, Eeyore, and putting them in a live action setting. Whereas the three, pretty much, and let's be honest, ILM led films.
Yeah.
Is Avengers, Ready Player One, and Solo. Those, you were creating these fantastical worlds. And in my opinion, out of the three, Ready Player One was the best. Because
Player One is the best.
Out of those three, is the best. I guess for me, the reason why, and maybe
we're going to have to agree to disagree on this one.
Well, okay. Well, actually, let me retract slightly, because again, it's still a different brief. I guess Ready Player One, because I was so involved in the story and because they were game avatars, I wasn't pulled out that they're not quite photoreal. But I didn't feel like, oh God, this is so visual effects over the top. Maybe I'm a bit numb to Avengers and Solo, like Star Wars stuff, because I'm obviously a very massive fan of the Star Wars franchise, and it's nothing new. It's always the same thing. The only thing that's really cool that came out of Solo was the cockpit stuff was actually on set. It was not post-production. That's more fascinating to me, but then that's not technically visual effects. That's special effects. And so that's the thing. And then the Marvel stuff, now, Grimace looked great. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm laughing at my own joke there. But I mean, the fate, Thanos.
That's why I feel like it's better than Ready Player One and Solo, is that Solo is absolutely everything you've already seen before, but packaged up with a really it's one of the least special films
I would agree
that came out last year. Ready Player One, I have a lot of problems with the quality of the story. And I know you said that you were really engrossed in it or whatever. But that, I feel like, just to jump forward in time, Alita, that's coming out very soon. I feel like Alita is going to do exactly as well as Ready Player One. Both of them have had, so Ready Player One had a budget of about $175 million. Alita is something between 150 and 200. Let's call that $175 million.
Yeah.
Ready Player One did not particularly well domestically in the US and made most of its money overseas. It probably didn't make a huge amount in total because of all of the marketing. There was so much marketing around it, and that's always super expensive. And Alita, I just don't think, I feel like it's got all the same problems in that your character is supposed to not look real.
Correct.
But it's still really uncomfortable to look at. Whereas Thanos, I didn't find uncomfortable to look at.
I do agree on both points. I do find Alita a bit more, I don't know if it's the big eyes or whatever that hers, and I was thinking that as a visual effect person, I was like, well, they can get away with this because it's not supposed to be photoreal, so this character can be that. So I totally understand, I totally agree on what you were saying on that. And I guess seeing kind of another superhero assembly film and having their villain fall so flat, with Steppenwolf, and then have Thanos. I mean,
I refuse for anyone to even slightly call Steppenwolf and Thanos even slightly comparable.
No, exactly. That's what I'm getting at. They're not and it's, again, it just shows it's kind of like, this is what happens with time, and that's a whole different debate. But I guess but Thanos is the only thing that stands out to me in Avengers. So that's more, that character was done really well. And so I'm just thinking of the visual. I guess I look at it from a whole thing. I don't know. I really don't know. Elke, this was my question I wanted to ask you, and I was trying not to interrupt. Did you read the book?
It's actually interesting. I was put off reading the book by just the trailer of the movie.
Well, they're not the same at all. And that's actually what put some people off, was because it's not like the book. And that's what, and when you were saying about Alita, I was like, I wonder if you know the graphic novel and the book, and so that.
Yeah.
And it was like, is that possibly playing into it? Nope, that's completely fair, and that just totally no, because I mean, I know how that goes, because I've done that. I don't read a lot because I don't read very, very well. Thank you, dyslexia. But I know what that is, going in with kind of a preconceived notion of the universe kind of thing. So I was just curious, not kind of like debunking your theories, but your views on it. But I was just kind of curious. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then First Man, like I said, I can't. I've never seen.
I've always considered it Oscar bait.
Yeah.
Sorry, whilst you were talking, I was absolutely listening to you, but I was also looking up outstanding animated character in a photoreal feature, which is the VES Awards.
Yes. This is why I'm glad we actually have the VES Awards, because I feel
exactly. So for this, we had Avengers Thanos, Christopher Robin Tigger.
He was cute, but no, Thanos was better.
Jurassic World, the Indoraptor.
No, and I'm a Jurassic Park fan. It wasn't much for Fallen Kingdom, but no, it just was another dinosaur. Nothing was spectacular about it. Sorry.
And Ready Player One, Artemis.
No, see, no.
Artemis. Sorry, I'm going to have to do the Fant Four stick thing every time I see names written like that. It's just too stupid.
Yeah, so no, that one, hands down.
So the last thing I wanted to bring up was Best Animated Feature. Because there's Incredibles 2, Isle of Dogs, Mirai, Ralph Breaks the Internet, and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And for me, the only thing that can win this is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Bingo.
Because they created a new way of doing animation. Like, I follow probably about 15 people who worked on this film on Instagram. And there's color keys, there's breakdowns of how they did stuff. There's the models with the paint overs, and it's amazing. The visual style, they have created an entirely new visual style for a movie, and it's incredible. And if that does not win Best Animated Feature, I will throw something.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with that. I'm not the biggest Wes Anderson fan, but I actually really enjoyed Isle of Dogs.
Oh, I loved it, but there was nothing new there. It was just Wes Anderson doing another great Wes Anderson movie.
Yes, no, and I agree with that. And I think that's the thing that talking about all these award categories, especially when we're talking about the visual effects and the animation, is we're kind of guessing, what does the Academy look at? Are they looking at just the visuals?
They need to look at the innovation.
Correct, exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. And that's kind of what the VES Awards is supposed to do, is to also look at those innovations and break it down further into a not so broad category.
Yeah.
But that's the tricky thing. And so I guess it's down to the voters and things on how do they cast their votes in the Academy. And I do hope it's for ingenuity and something different, because that's how these other films kind of get made, and it opens the doors for other things, because if you don't, people get bored.
Yeah, and apparently Sony are trying to trademark the techniques they used for this movie.
For sure.
So, again, interested to hear how that goes, because it's a really interesting style, and the amount of work that goes into every frame. I know that we can't talk about more work went in, that means it's better, because then that would mean that Avatar is the best film that's ever been made, hands down.
Exactly. That's a very good point.
And Avatar, I guarantee a lot of people who are listening to this went, oh yeah, that was a movie that came out. Because no one considers Avatar their favorite movie.
No, it was Fern Gully in space.
It was Pocahontas.
Yeah, and I can't believe they're making 3 more.
I know, it's crazy.
But it's taking them a lot longer than they thought it would be, but yeah.
Probably because they're trying to make 3 at once, the fools.
Yeah. Cool.
Anyway, shall we wrap it up?
So that pretty much wraps it up. Thank you for having listened to us. If you want to chat to us and give us some feedback, or would like to even just reach out and say hello, we're on a couple different social medias. So we are at Pending Final at Twitter, or we are at Pending Final Podcast on Instagram. We'll start trying to post some behind the scenes photos and just keep updates. I'll be showing kind of the post-production process and just keeping you updated there. And yes, also, if you just want to get in contact, we're pendingfinal@gmail.com.
So if you've got any other experiences that you've had in the industry, if you want to like call us out and tell us that we've talked about animation incorrectly because you're an animator and you know better than us, please feel free to. We are happy to talk. And also, if you can, rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes or whatever your favorite podcasting platform is. It will do wonders for this beautiful little podcast.
Thank you very much, and see you guys next time.
Bye.